BMW original Motorsport 3 series, the E30 M3 was arguably the best small sports saloon of its era. A race-bred homologation special. Only 5,000 E30 M3s were originally built to qualify for Group A competition. But then it was so sufficiently popular that nearly 18,000 were ultimately built. The E30 M3's popularity was a surprise given some of its obvious drawbacks. It was only available in left-hand drive, it was very expensive, and it was 4-cylinder, and not particularly refined. Most of these issues would be addressed on its successor, the E36 M3. The new car came with a straight-six engine, a bigger body shell, and could be ordered as a coupe, convertible, or saloon. Right-hand drive examples were available soon after production began, but the cars bound for the USA still needed toning down due to environment standards. Unlike its forebear, the new M3 was not created as a homologation special. This allowed BMW to target the car to a wider audience, which provided a great success. By the end of production, 70,000 E36 M3s had been completed, 3.5 times more than its predecessor. The suspension was a familiar McPherson strut layout at the front with a multi-link Z-axle at the rear. The suspension geometry was revised, progressive spring rates, and stiffer dampers were fitted, as well as the ride height being lowered by 30mm. Reinforced spring mounting points were installed along with modified track arms, reinforced stub axles, thicker anti-roll bars, and wheel bearings from an 850i. Enormous ventilated brake discs were much bigger than before, 315mm at the front and 313mm at the rear. The M3 also came with a retuned ABS and a larger brake master cylinder. A standard 16-gallon fuel tank was also located under the rear seats. 4 new versions of cast alloy wheels were also designed for the car, Type 22 being 21 pounds, Type 23 at 23.5 pounds, Type 24 just shy of 20 pounds, also came on the E36 lightweight and GT models, Type 39 weighing in at 22.5 pounds, all measuring in at 17 by 7.5 inches wide. The M3's S50 B32 engine was developed from a dual overhead camshaft 24-valve M50 unit found in the contemporary 3 and 5 series BMWs. It featured a cast iron block with a new ported and polished head. Compared to the 2.5-liter M50 unit, bore was increased from 84mm to 86mm, and stroke was extended from 75mm to 85.8mm. A first for BMW was their Vanos, a variable valve timing system for the inlet camshaft that provided improved torque and fuel efficiency, as well as new heavy-duty valve springs. A Bosch Motronic M 3.3 engine management system and a dual-mass flywheel were also fitted. Compression was also increased from 10:1 to 10.8:1. The S50 engine was easily identifiable thanks to its BMW M-Power script on the Crackle Black cam cover. Peak output was 286 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 236 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM in Germany, and in the American model, we had 240 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 225 foot-pounds of torque at 4,250. For comparison, the 2.5-liter M50 engine produced 189 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 181 foot-pounds of torque at 4,700 RPM. Transmission was via close ratio manual 5-speed ZF gearbox, single plate clutch, and a limited slip differential. They also made an automatic variant. A series of subtle exterior modifications improved airflow and gave a more sporting appearance. BMW's M Sport body kit fitted to the M3 was comprised of custom bumpers, skirts, and wing mirrors. Perhaps the most significant departure was the M3's new high-backed M-Design Vader seats. In standard form, they were upholstered in Alcantara suede bolsters and velour fabric centers. Motorsport stripes were added to the vertical face of each seat. Although BMW initially had no plans to sell the E36 chassis in America, mainly because of the 286 horsepower engine not meeting American standards, but requests from customers eventually saw the decision reversed. Production of the US spec M3 continued until January 1996. The 3-liter E36 M3 was subsequently replaced by the 3.2-liter M3 Evolution, sporting the revised S52 engine. As had been the case with the original 3-liter E36 M3, the 3.2 Evolution, destined for the USA, were quite different beasts from the rest of the world. However, the full, fat 321 horsepower Evolution engine was not legal for sale in the USA. Instead, these cars came with a short-stroke type S52 B32 power unit derived from the standard M52 unit. The power output was unchanged from the US spec 3-liter M3, still coming in at a whopping 240 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, with the torque being slightly increased to 236 foot-pounds at 3,800 RPM. All right, guys, so we're inside the E36 M3 now, and we're gonna give you a little overview of what it's like to drive one of these cars. So this is an automatic version. Stay tuned because we will be making this car a manual in a later video. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button and the notification so that you can get notified when we release videos. Really love this car. Honestly, the interior cockpit feel is amazing. I love that I can literally, without leaning over very much, I can touch the other side of the car, so it does feel very narrow in here. The dash is honestly perfectly set up, if you ask me. Radio at the top, most important thing, so you can get your tunes and be jamming out. AC controls underneath it, very clear and easy to use and read. This is probably the only thing that, you know, old BMWs, if you know, from the E30 generation or the E36 generation, they got these weird clock screens and all these buttons that really don't do much or you don't use in today's times. But yeah, the car's pretty bitchin' for the era. I would say it's got some pretty cool technology like heated seats. For that to come in 1995, that's pretty wild. They were pretty ahead of their time with that. Especially these being the manual Vaders. These aren't even powered seats. These are the manual version of the Vaders. Very cool that they actually came with heated seats still. The overall driving feel of the car, the steering feel is kind of lazy. It is a, 21 plus year old car, so a little bit of play, a little bit of slop in the front end is expected with something this age. It isn't brand new off the lot. I'm sure when they were brand new, they were a little tighter feeling. But nonetheless, the car feel is great. And for something being 21 years old, really the struts have not deteriorated that much. This car is still on the stock suspension, surprisingly. Really surprised with how well it takes bumps. But let's get it out on the highway and give it a little gas, see how she does. Inline 6 kicking there. This is the first M3 to ever be built with an inline 6 engine. The previous generation of 3 Series had 4 cylinders, so quite a big boost in power from the previous generation in this car. This car being a 1995, it is the only year that came with the S50 B30 engine, which is actually kind of the better engine to have in my opinion. In 96 through 99, they had to implement OBD2 in the car, and it also meant that the emissions laws got a little bit stricter, so BMW had to take the engine back to the drawing board and revise it a little bit for emission standards, and they came up with what's called the S52 B30, which came out in 1996. So this is a 1-year variant car with this motor. Very cool, very unique. In my opinion, it makes it worth more valuable because it is more rare, essentially. But yeah, the motor honestly has that typical, that you can expect of an inline 6 BMW motor, that typical chainsaw sound, really raspy, and just, wants a rev to the moon, wants a rev to red line. And the power is just so linear, honestly. The torque is very similar at, 3,000 RPM and 5,000 RPM. So very usable power band, really fun to drive, and I'm sure in 1995 this thing was a ripper. I'm a little spoiled nowadays with the cars I get to drive. like some of the newer M3s and Porsches and whatnot. They're so fast and they're so good, but this car was amazing for its time. I don't think there's a car that can touch it for the price range or even come close. But realistically, super ergonomical cabin. I mean, you got 2 cup holders here. How many more cup holders do you need in a car? You know, you got power windows, you got a sport button here, you know, manual, shifting, and sport for the different modes for the transmission. You got your headlight switch over here, you know, wipers and blinkers and all that stuff in your typical location. Cruise control here in a very good, easy to access spot. I mean, really just the ergonomics of this car are top notch. Nice big glove box over here. Fit a bunch of stuff, and it's also cool. Oh, my bad. Never mind. I thought that actually had a drawer up there, but it doesn't. Mechanical e-brake, we love those, so that you can do your e-brake initiations when you want to go drifting. So if you look up, we do have a sunroof. We just closed it, but quite a big sunroof, honestly. This thing is bigger than some of the newer cars that I've seen. Rear seat. It's actually a pretty usable rear seat. It's definitely very comfortable if you're a smaller guy. I've sat back there just to check it. We'll actually, we'll get a shot here in a second of me jumping back there so you guys can kind of see what it's like for a bigger guy to get back there. So I'm 6'1", 6'2", and I could ride back there if I needed to. I wouldn't want to for a very long time, but it's definitely doable. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a dailyable car. They do also make this car in a 4-door variant. This was the first time as well that BMW not only had an inline 6-cylinder engine, but also came out with a 2- and 4-door variant. They do have a convertible variant as well, if you're interested in convertibles. Very good value in the convertibles if that's what you're looking for. They're a little bit less desirable, a little harder to resell on the secondhand market, but nonetheless, you get the great bones of an E36 M3. As a daily car, it actually gets pretty good gas mileage. I've put some pretty good miles on this car, and I'd say we're probably getting roughly in the 20-ish mile per gallon range. I haven't actually calculated it, but with the little bit of math that I've done, it's roughly around 20, 22 miles a gallon. I'm sure you could probably get that a lot better too if you know, you make sure everything's tuned up perfectly. I don't know how the spark plugs and some of the other stuff on this car are. It is a lower mileage car. The car has 100 to 1,000 miles, and the engine was factory replaced around, I think, 40 or 60,000 miles. So the engine is actually relatively low mileage. But yeah, I mean, the automatic transmission is very smooth shifting. It's a little lazy, if you ask me, for the downshifts. You know, I would definitely prefer this car in a manual. I definitely think manual is the way to go if you're looking to buy one of these. If you can get an automatic for a good deal, get it, and you can always swap it later on down the road. But if you can spring for it, I would get the manual from the get. And yeah, just overall, a really fun, really good car. Amazing turning radius. We literally just turned around in a 2-lane road, so not very bad there. Let's see, we got a little chicane coming up here. Let's get this thing through the chicane and see how she does. Little roundabout. See how the turn in and turn out feels. Brakes are a little bit mushy, being that it's an older car. Turn in's pretty good. Actually pretty good. Feels like it has a lot of grip. Honestly, I could have hit that thing easily twice as fast as I just hit it right now. They do have a Z3 rack, which is an upgrade for this car, which, you know, if I own this car, I might do. It's I think it's 1/3 quicker steering. But yeah, that might be kind of nice little addition to this thing to help with your turn-in. Typical BMW frameless window noise, which you can expect of most BMWs for the last couple generations. I'm sure when they were in 95, they were a little bit quieter, but there is a little bit of wind noise coming through the window here. But yeah, overall, just a very, very usable car and very reliable, you know, for their age. You still see a lot of these cars and even E30s and stuff on the road, and that's just a testament to their reliability. These seats are really extremely comfortable. Pretty good side bolstering here, especially for something that is, you know, essentially not really a sports seat. I believe that the bucket seats are a little bit less comfortable and have a little bit more aggressive bolstering, but really, really comfortable seat. I could easily take a road trip in this car and, you know, not have to worry about my butt getting sore, my legs getting sore. Quite a bit of room for storage. There's so much room for storage here. You got a pocket for your phone down here. You got a big pocket in the door over here. No dedicated center console, but you got a little section here to put stuff as well. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So I would like to talk about some of the characteristics of this engine that are different from the S52 that make this engine very unique. So one of which is going to be these intake ports. These intake runners are like double the size of the S52 intake ports, as well as it's not a major change cosmetically, but the valve cover is actually metal on the S50 on this front cam cover section, where the S52 was actually plastic. The other things that are different to this motor are underneath the intake manifold. It has less emission stuff, like EGR and whatnot. That really makes this motor a lot better motor comparatively to the S52. But if you just take a look at it, it's quite simple to work on. You've got two little bolts holding on your covers for your coil packs and spark plugs. Your air filter box is actually quick releases to remove your air filter, very easy. One thing I love about BMWs from this generation is a lot of the electrical connectors just spin and come off. Way ahead of their time. But honestly, very simple, very easy to work on motor. And you know, for those of you out there that are doing stuff to your car DIY, this is a great platform to start with because it is very simple. It's not turbocharged. You know, there isn't a whole bunch of emission systems. There's not a bunch of crazy wiring. There's not a bunch of crazy vacuum lines. It's very simple. And because of that, it's part of what makes this motor so reliable and makes this car so desirable. But enough about the S50 engine. Let's take a look at this beautiful color changing paint, which was sprayed after the fact. The car originally is a Hellrot red car, but we've gone ahead and had the car repainted in 1999 to this beautiful color changing purple, which in some lights looks pink and some lights looks blue and others even looks brown at times. Even sometimes you get some reddish orangish hues to it. Really, really beautiful. I love just walking around the car and gathering in all the body lines because it's just like every which way you look at it, the car looks different. The body lines are almost changing and morphing. Just an amazing color, honestly. Really reminds me of, you know, the old R32 Skylines that used to come in this color. Very, very cool color. This is like such a 90s thing, I feel like. You know, you don't see cars these days painted in colors like this. And it is really such a rarity. Probably, you know, it's the only E36 M3 I've ever seen or heard of in this color, but probably potentially the only E36 M3 in the world in this color, actually. So that makes it very, very rare. Got a few little cosmetic blemishes that you would expect of a car of this age, but overall the car is in really good shape. And man, I would sure love to own this thing, but it is a friend of mine's and he is a lucky, lucky man.